collaborations with government and industry to kind of take on questions in this space, particularly around critical decision making and human machine teaming.
Excellent. Well, yeah, Shengyang Li, actually, I want to turn over to you. Obviously, you came out of industry, you know, working as a consultant and a corporate design manager, but also, you know, really kind of shifted over to a much more of academic role on top of doing all your research and your kind of, you know, work with the H Lab. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background also and kind of how you approach, you know, teaching at MIT.
Thank you, Gregor. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I know people are in the process of eating meal. I hope everyone has still like not food coma, still awake. We try the best to share the cool story, juicy story. So I'm training as designer, and I love design. I work in industry for 7 years before I back to MIT. So I actually view MIT as my client. And exciting, my research now focus on human behavior and service design, and mainly like focus on design for retirement. So the idea is like shifted the idea from design for retirement to design for longevity. So everything around services, human behavior, and now really focus on use the statistic to kind of validate some thoughts and findings from the experiment. Very excited to be here to share my stories and journeys.
Excellent. And yeah, and Diane Pfeiffer from Virginia Tech. Love to hear your perspective and also your background a little bit. Introduce yourself to the panelists.
Sure. My name is Diane Pfeiffer. I'm an instructor here at Virginia Tech in the Industrial Design program. Yeah, my background is most recently in fabrication, prototyping, model making, and I studied industrial design for my master's. And right now I just currently teach a first-year design studio, so just beginning designers, and I also teach an AI tools for design short class. And so I think that my background and interest is really about thinking about like the digital tools and the technology, of course, that allows designers to move forward. But yeah, I'm here to learn as much as everybody else.
Excellent. Yeah, and you know, it was really exciting to have the opportunity for Love to present to your students. For folks who don't know, you know, some of our designers, actually Saloni, who's on the call, and Maggie, put together a little mini curriculum to take our learnings that we actually have from working with AI over the last couple of years and shared with you know, people in industry, but also with people in academia. So we're pretty excited we were able to you know, talk to the Virginia Tech students and give them a little bit of a snapshot of how the evolving landscape of using AI generative tools is shaping up. I have a first question, and that's really more about kind of, I would say, the root of anxiety around design education. You know, I'm full disclosure, I teach adjunct at RISD, and many of my students always, you know, are really conflicted of using AI because they're afraid, you know, especially if you have somebody from the illustration department or somebody who's doing like more graphic design, you know, they feel that, you know, these tools are gonna eliminate their jobs in the future. Diane, maybe you can talk a little bit about like if you've heard similar things and how you kind of, you know, have this discord at Virginia Tech.
Yes, certainly. I feel that a number of students have mentioned that. And I think that, I mean, to be fair, outside of my class, I don't see students using AI very much, AI tools. And I think in part that's because they're concerned about the perception of how they're using AI, and maybe that's not appropriate for that particular class or something like that. So I think that students are really trying to tread this very careful line as universities maybe are figuring out their own policies. And certainly, I mean, here at Virginia Tech, my understanding is that, you know, each class has its own policies about what may be allowable for a particular class, but that might be very different for a different class, for instance.
Right. Yeah. Shengyang, what do you hear from your students at MIT?
It's like I TA for the class called Aging in Built Environment, and then I think last semester it's a project-based course, and we have like a sponsor for students project, And the cool thing is realize they naturally integrate the AI in their presentation. So you can see the slide with all like, you can see the images generated by AI versus the real field work photos. So I told them, yeah, I love this, very efficient, beautiful, but I didn't see any people in the photos. Where is the research, right? So it's like, I'm very exciting for the more possibility. Also help us also ask the more essential question, like, what do you mean by human-centered design, right? Everything would be like, oh, beautiful, fancy rendering, but we need to go to the field to capture the photos. And that's the thing I'm looking for. So I love the, like, all the possibility, but also I think about the next step, also rethink about the original framework, human-centered design. What does that mean for in a context of AI?
Yeah, Helen, I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well.
So I would say we're, at least in our particular college of design, we have close relationships to data science. In our program, our graphic and experience design program, we have a certificate of data science that our students can also get that's joint kind of between data science and design. So we're really emphasizing data science literacy as a needed skill for designers. And I think as students become more comfortable working with data and they begin to understand data, it is a nice bridge into using AI in thoughtful ways. We really are, in my classes, I really emphasize students understanding the capabilities and limitations of AI and engaging very deeply with that in the digital products that they're producing. And so I see less fear because I feel like they're getting more comfortable. They really understand how the tools are working, and so they're less fearful when they have a deeper understanding of the tools themselves. They feel less magical and less intimidating when they understand the limitations that are in place. So I feel very positive. Going back to your like fears thing, and I try to placate the fears of my students, not in a dismissive way, because I do think we will go through a lot of upheaval in coming years, and we have to be ready for that, and they have to be ready for that. So I'm not dismissive of their fears, but I feel very optimistic. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? I would say what we noticed in our studio, and also I talked to other folks that teach design, that it requires almost a retooling of your process, right? Because as Shengyang said, like, you have the ability to create an end visual basically at the at the beginning of a project, and sometimes it's really challenging for stakeholders to understand that it's not done, right? So you have to almost work backwards, and sometimes what we do is we use kind of AI generated content for internal stimulus more than we actually use it to kind of use it as a deliverable for client work. So I think there is definitely a learning curve, and that's why we always encourage everybody in our studio to use it, because it's almost like you have to harness the tool. You have to put a boundary around the tool to make it become useful, and that means you have to interact with it ongoingly to kind of leverage the best insights you get from that tool. And I would love to hear a little bit from you guys if there is segments of classes, or if you have experimented with kind of just an AI only module within a class, or just encouraging folks to kind of try out different tools, and how that has been in your teaching process. Zhengyang, maybe you can start.
Yeah, we this is a great question. We actually did like some experiment last year. We like host a 2 weeks design workshop in Taiwan, in Taipei, and kind of redesign how do we build an age tech city. And it's pretty cool. Like the students, we kind of forced them to put generative AI tools in the design process. So the idea is like, yeah, we do the brainstorming, but we want to know how do you create your prompts to best help you leverage the tool to give you like better ideas only in the generation ideas phase. So it's pretty fascinating to see they're engaging, and also we got some feedback, and I feel like it's great to have new way to think about design process. I think for me, my personal stories is like, I put the data set to the chat GPT to get some beautiful cluster analysis result. And I'm very excited to share my advisor. And somehow, oh, this is a beautiful result. Can you tell me the process? And I couldn't speak. I just silent. I don't know how to talk because I cannot tweak the measurement. Everything's so beautifully, right? So like, oh, it is a result oriented. Yeah, I totally, oh shit. I thought I can have convinced the idea, oh, this is a great math model. We can use it to do the cluster analysis. It turns out I can tweak the important things. And then I just, I'll get rid of this. Let's just do like step by step, use SPSS, Excel to really like step by step to understand the process. So somehow it's like, it's efficient, but also like how transparent the process we can be involved in part of this process. Something that is fascinating to me.
Right. I almost feel like, in design education, it is crucial for the students to go through the conventional design process and then understand that first, and then be able to understand which parts of it they can be augmented with an AI tool, right? But if you start with an AI tool, you have no process, right? Because it's, as you said, it's like it's especially with if you do prompts or if you even do like vision inputs, it's really like it is iterative, but it's like cyclical iterative, right? It's not a process iterative, right? And I think that's where the challenges come. Yeah. Diane, I think you said you have a module that teaches kids. What do you do in that class?
So in the class, it's really more of an overview and like an introduction in a way, kind of like what Helen was talking about, just trying to open up the idea of using AI and to maybe demystify it a little bit, make it a little less scary, and also to talk about like what are some of the ethical issues around it. But because it's such a short class, we really just sort of dip our toe into a variety of different tools, really common tools, and also looking for ways that designers and current design companies out there are using tools, like using these AI tools. So using Midjourney for like early iteration, or looking at like, can we create mood boards, or maybe like even just something that you might, instead of going to Pinterest for, you might use AI to help generate some of these images for you, whether that's a background for a render or the image of a future user of something. But so really sort of early, like kind of expansive look at it. But I think to your point as well, I think the idea of using AI and thinking about it as the process rather than the output is really critical here. And I think that that's something that I'd like to encourage my students to think about more.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I don't think this webinar should be just about tools. So I'd love to jump a little bit more on a philosophical level. Obviously, you guys are in touch with the future design leaders of this country or the world. And I want to hear a little bit of, I feel design has really shifted in not only incorporating human-centered design principles, but also, taking on a responsibility towards, the earth, sustainability, technology evolution in a sustainable way. We know that generative AI is using a lot of power. All these aspects of kind of design thinking. How does that manifest in your education, and how do you feel that AI is kind of, hindering, excelling, or kind of convoluting that narrative, right? Sheng-Hyun, I want to start with you.
No, this is a great question. I really think for me, the AI is not artificial intelligence, it's anticipating intelligence. So the reason I say that, I feel like, I don't know, we can have generative AI to have thousands of ideas, but I want to know how to curate my lifestyle. I want to know how can enhance my taste. And this is all need to real live experiences, right? Like you can't say, oh, I got a virtual reality tool, so I feel I'm in the museum, but you have to be there to have interact with people. So I feel the funny things, like I love new technology, but because of that, I want to be more close to human. So that can make me know better to leverage the technology. Because I feel, I mean, because of AI tools, everyone can use it. Everyone tell themselves, I'm designer, or you grab the poster note, you're a design thinker, right? But what's the core ability? Like, can you do like have a great interview? Do you know how to facilitate a conversation? Do you know how to leading your team, guiding your team, not managing your team, right? And these are soft skills. I feel AI really celebrate the importance of human skill and soft skill, not just the hardcore design skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Helen.
So I was so interested in that. I lost a little bit of the thread of your original question. So I'm just gonna
Okay, sorry.
I'm gonna add on to that because I think that, so thinking about AI from a more, philosophical level and where we're going, et cetera, with our students, I do think that space in which we are moving beyond that kind of automation productivity space and moving more into a augmenting human space. That's the interesting innovation space right now. Like, how can we leverage AI to sort of move not away from human values, but to expand human capabilities? I think that's a super interesting space right now. And design plays such a key role in that, because we are really good at thinking about these ideas of kind of giving form to not just a future, but a optimal future or a preferred future, and trying to make that future into a reality. I think it's a heavy responsibility for designers right now. I don't think it's just going to happen. I think we're going to have to go back to Diane's points about ethics. And I mean, there's so many. I don't think that AI systems are naturally conducive to the kind of future that we want. I think we're going to have to push the technology in the directions that we want it to go to live in the future we want to live in. And I think it's going to take a lot of effort. And I think designers play a key role in that.
I agree. Yeah. I think I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I feel whenever you're interacting with an AI system, the outcome is a very personal outcome, right? And we see this in our studio. Every designer has a slightly different process to leverage AI, and it's really almost a representation of their design style or their design philosophy in a sense, right? And and you said it right. Are we marching towards a dystopian future, or are we marching towards a utopian future leveraging AI? I think the verdict is still out there. I think one challenge I see is, and I mentioned this before, is that non-designers, I would say, can easily misunderstand the role of AI in design, just because it is such a polished deliverable, right? That we've heard this from folks actually in the startup scene, that they say, well, I made our design in AI. Can you guys build it for us, right? So there is this kind of shortcut, this desire for shortcutting the design process with AI tools. And I think that also, as students are kind of going through their educational process, how do you emphasize that is not what is acceptable, right? As a designer, that you need to really learn the process, or manifest yourself in the way you design, and not jump to that conclusion right away. Diana, maybe you can talk about like your students and how that is, where those conversations go in crits when people show up with finished projects and you haven't even given them a brief yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I feel that I'm not sure where I read it, but I feel like I was reading something, and they were talking about how students that got the most out of classes were the classes that maybe they liked the least, but were the most painful for them. And in a way, I guess I'm kind of leaning towards that too, where it's, again, thinking about how maybe can I, as an instructor, utilize AI to have the students spend more time on the process and to maybe understand the process for themselves, as opposed to looking at it to create that shortcut or to just get to the answer. And that maybe it's somehow thinking about utilizing that sort of, whether it's a conversational AI, or maybe it's having students evaluate more the process of generating images and thinking about why as well as how, and less emphasis on what is the result.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm glad you bring this up. I mean, we always talk about kind of, there's two types of approaches to design, right? So there's, in design school, you learn how to design, which is all the tools and basically, getting up to speed on kind of mastering those tools. But then there's also this idea of why you should design. And that's a much more nuanced conversation, right? And it takes really a lot of trial and error. And I mean, at RISD, there's famous classes that nobody wants to take, but after they took them, wood and metal, there's still a requirement. They realize, it's like this kind of interaction with an object, and making it work over a semester is a very meaningful exercise. And it might not seem meaningful at the moment, but if you go back and you think, how your design thought leadership has evolved through it, it's really fundamental, right? That you are, as a designer, you're kind of connecting thought with objects, right? And if you start doing that over and over again, that is a very helpful exercise, right? I think Shangyang, I want to talk to you because I know, I go to MIT all the time, and one of the things that always blows me away is that, you go into the class studio and you see people forging, and there's still, even that it's such an academic school, it's a lot of hands-on that's happening, right? How do you kind of leverage, or how do you marinate that with AI, right? How do you bring that together?
Yeah, this is thanks for sharing. I think I actually feel like because of AI, I feel imperfect is much more important than perfection. I feel like every time the kids came to me and said, oh, can I have like portfolio review? I always ask them, like, can you give me like 3 failure stories? Because I know you through your failure. I know you through your vulnerability. I not know you through your perfection. Because to achieve perfection is way too easy, right? Like I saw like crazy app, like just sketch a little bit and come with the whole shape of the car, the very very sexy sneakers. But I feel like, okay, what is the failure? I want to know how do you overcome this? So like keep trying prototyping. I do feel like AI can be a great tool for prototyping, actually. So one of the way I'm doing when I'm writing paper is like, yeah, I finished the paper, I got a feedback from all the co-authors, but I throw that to ChatGPT. Give me the ideas. Where is the weakness point of this writing? So I got a lot of feedback, and then I implement that to more writing, add more sophisticated layers of it. So I feel that actually helped me to prototyping more efficiently with meanings, not just aiming for perfection. So it feel like more like a process oriented. I do feel like at MIT, the students took the classes, like everyone knows AI tools, they even making coding fastly, efficiently. But I feel the real beautiful part is the story of failure.
Yeah, I think failure is really what shapes us as designers, right? Maybe Helen, you want to talk about that a little bit. Also, I mean, I know your work is, more on the graphic and UX side, so there's less of a physical part to it. But however, nevertheless, I feel like closest to like physical design in graphic design is typography, right? It's really understanding the roots, the history, understanding how you can leverage it, and then even bringing it in a digital domain. Love to hear your perspective on both of those.
Okay, so I would say I think that the discussion about physical objects is interesting because, when you're working with a physical material, you're shaping that material. As you work with it, you begin to understand what you can and cannot do with it, right? The affordances of the material. And we're in a place right now where we can do the same thing with AI, right? It is a design material. John Zimmerman at CMU has some really good discussions around this idea of AI as a design material. And I think it's a nice way to introduce it to students because they're familiar with that idea of like the cardboard will bend or it will not bend. It will, what can I do with this material? What can I not? And for them to begin to understand that around this technology is so important, and to think of it as a material that they do need to experiment with, understand, so that they can use it so that they can really use it in innovative ways, right? If they don't understand that, they can't kind of push toward those sort of innovative use cases. And that's a whole nother topic, but I do think that finding the right use cases is what we're really missing right now, right? The really high impact, positive places where we need to be, we can think about AI. In terms of typography, you bring up typography. I honestly haven't thought about that typography that much. in this space. I think that typography has certainly changed. We're, with variable type and thinking about type that's responding to context user, completely so I think our notion of type and typography as a fixed entity with fixed rules has certainly been just torn apart in the last few years, which is an exciting place, I think, for us to be thinking.
It is, yeah. And I think also, it was interesting. We finished a branding project maybe a couple months ago, and the graphic team internally actually started using AI for, basically treatment of font, like understanding, how to like really do micro nuances on like font refinement. And it was interesting because, when you shape a font by hand, you're still kind of limited by your own thought, right? But AI doesn't have that constraint. So it gives you like some very surprising, actually interesting outcomes sometimes, right? That then you can feedback. And I would say the critical aspect of leveraging AI technology in design is the crit, right? Like cultivating, why is it good? How is it good? How does it make an impact on what I need? That's a really important narrative when you get input for yourself, right, as a designer, and not just say, okay, I like this polished image, I'm just going to put it in my presentation, but why is it good, and how can I use it becomes much, much more important.
I'll throw a plug in for education around that then, because I agree with that. And that is why education is so important in that space, because it is a space in which you have the time to go deep and to really think about what you're doing that you don't necessarily have the time to do once you get into industry and you're trying to hit those deadlines, you're working with your, that is something that's really special about education that I think makes the education space even more precious than it's been in the past, because we provide that.
Yeah, there's two segues I want to touch off on. The first one, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I feel, in a sense, a designer charges their battery when they get educated, and then they deplete the battery throughout their, professional career. But because you say, like we always have interns starting here and they realize, okay, my, 6-month project happens in 3 weeks in a studio. so it's just a different way of working, right? And I think that the more you can root yourself as a designer in your educational process, the better off you are for, the challenges of kind of designing under that tight deadlines. Yeah, maybe anybody else wants to jump in there. I'd love to hear. Okay, Diane.
I mean, just kind of going back to thinking about like what AI can do for us and thinking about the process. I mean, yeah. I'm going to step away again. I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. I think one thing I wanted to, kind of maybe segue. Actually, we want to maybe have 10 minutes for questions. If anybody brings in, questions, please drop them in the chat. We're gonna paraphrase them and bring them up to our panelists. But there is, I would say, the traditional design education, which is, you go to undergrad or maybe even grad school. More and more designers nowadays actually kind of come from other, educational backgrounds, and then maybe are interested in design. And, there's a whole cotton industry around kind of boot camps and getting up to speed on, especially in UX UI. I would love to hear, and that accelerated with AI. Is there an alternative for real education, or like a longer term education with more like technically driven kind of boot camps? Maybe Shanghyang, you can start on that. But what's your perspective?
Yeah, this is a great question. I feel like actually that makes me think about the purpose back to school.
Right.
Because to be honest, now you give me like 7 days, I can learn any skill on YouTube very fast and efficiently. And what's the purpose at school? I feel like you're learning from your peers. And then I really feel like, yeah, AI can be a great problem solving tools. and then the human skills still need to learn and develop. I learned so much from the like in-person experiences, and I feel that's one of the software, and also realize the software I learned, the CADing, the sketching in school, it's all not relevant. I mean, the version changed a lot, but the concept was there, right? And I feel the same apply to AI. Yeah, we know the structure and the framework of AI, and then the next step is like, how can we make more meaningful way to use it, to apply it, to solve specific questions? But that doesn't mean like we need to replace all our education or the way I'm thinking as design, because I still believe that design is around human. And then we design the object or graphic is with temperature. It's not like, hey, one clip, this is it. No, it's like a lot of discussion, and we know your pain point. It sounds very old-fashioned, but I feel that's how human is, like I feel like that's the way it make me happy. It's not about, how efficient you got a solution. It's about the process, how to get that process. And same to us, like now we work with a lot of like sponsor in the healthcare or the banking industry. We still need to empower them. Yeah, the challenges, like for example, I'm working on financial planning project. Advisor will say, we don't need like in-person meetup, we just use a Zoom. And then what I argue is like, it's very efficient, very transactional, but you don't have like any memory, It just like, you close the Zoom, then we're done. And how do you connect with that? AI can make it more efficient for sure, but what I mean by that is like, there's a physical memory. There's important thing about human piece. It shouldn't be
Right.
complex. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and in a sense, really, we're designing more and more for the digital space, but it's still the humans interacting with the digital space, right? So you always have to keep that in mind. Helen, especially in UX UI, I would say boot camps are very popular. Is that a true alternative for like a UX UI education at a higher ed institution? Do you feel it's extra? Is it another path? What's your perspective?
I think that there's a lot of great boot camps out there. I think it's a different experience than a kind of what you're calling, a traditional education. It's
Right.
very skill based, right? And we're actually not trying to emulate practice in an education environment. If that's all we were trying to do, we would just have apprenticeships. What would be the point, right? We're trying to go much deeper than that. And you've talked about that, Gregor, and this idea of like when you talked about charging up your battery, et cetera. I think that boot camps certainly have their place. I think they can be really useful, particularly for someone who's trying to acquire new skills and kind of fit it into their lifestyle as they move through. I think it's a different experience, and it brings I would say my criticism of boot camps is that, and this is what people who, I have students that come to me and ask me about this. My caution is that there are boot camps out there that are very predatory. They're very expensive, and they seem like they're not, but as you start adding up the expense of each course you're taking, it suddenly starts ballooning. So I think like any other product, it's a product, and you have to be really careful when you're selecting it. So that is a caution. What I hear from employers around boot camps is that there are a lot of boot camps that also produce kind of the exact same portfolio in people coming out. So they have those people come in and they're like, oh, this so-and-so boot camp, that's what you did, because it looks exactly the same. So I also caution, just if you're going into a boot camp, you need to be aware of that and think about what you want the outcome to be for you, and take some, have some agency around that. So, but I think they can be very valuable. I just think it's a different experience, and you just, just a different experience.
Right. Yeah, I think, what I think is interesting, I'm glad you're bringing this up. So, we see this all the time. People apply for jobs at Loft, and you can definitely see if somebody's really doing the research, or if somebody's just putting together the format around research to kind of tick that box, right? And it's very easy to see that, and especially if you're bringing somebody in for an interview. Shengyang said as well. I think that design is basically the study of human interaction, and the better you are at asking questions, writing questions, synthesizing insights, it's really about kind of the outcome. It's much more outcome driven than process driven, right? The process is a framework you're using to get to that outcome. And it's not just a, like a process. I'm basically going through the XYZ process and get to my results, right? It's really, I'm deploying this process to get to a meaningful outcome that then I can leverage to build a better product, right? So I agree with you. That's really helpful. Yeah, I think we have about 16 minutes left. Maybe a quick round. I'd love to hear a little bit more on kind of this idea of, future-proofing design education. AI is rapidly changing. You guys are thought leaders in your industries, in your educational, institutions. How does faculty get up to speed on AI? How do they, keep up with the constant revolving and changing landscape? Is there even time for you guys to get up to speed, or do keep up with what industry is the new tools? Maybe Diane, I mean, do you have like a AI sabbatical that you're taking? Like, how does that work?
I wish. I mean, in a way, I guess I just feel like, at least from my point of view, it's of course like personal interest, and then, like individual instructors or professors' research interest, and whether AI can lend itself to part of the research process. At least that's sort of the point of view that I've come to. I mean, from my experience, it's really about a personal interest. And going back to something that I think Helen and Shenghang also mentioned was thinking about like what it is that you as an individual kind of bring to the table in that learning environment, and so thinking about what AI can, or how AI can kind of help me leverage what my experiences already are. I think that that's sort of one way that you could kind of future-proof and try and communicate that to your students, that it's really, it really is about what you already have learned, and then how you can use AI to help leverage it in different aspects.
Excellent. Shengyang.
Yeah, I think this is a great question and reflection. I'm thinking about my experiences is like, like when we do the qualitative research, like we interview people, we record it, we got to transcribe, and we try to coding people's like oh, they're learning their sentences, the keywords, and we call it grounded theory, right? And it used to be like a manual, like, oh, coding one by one is very like time consuming, still time consuming. But I was surprised, like, because now the AI tools, AI can help you coding, AI empower you to coding. It's beyond my imagination. So fast, quickly see the context. And I feel that kind of the moment I feel like, oh, wow. So what's the role for ethnographer? What's the role for like a design researcher in this research process, right? How can we teach people to learn, to acquire, to adapt this new environment and area? Because most of the scientists, I mean, at least in my lab, it's like they really like follow the traditional way, line by line. But once this tool has come up, it changed the scope of the project, the speed of the project, the people's expectation, the client's expectation, right? So I feel like we're in the beautiful area, like a lot of possibility. And how do you choose? What's the trade-off? And yeah, AI can help us coding very efficiently, but do you really understand the content? Or just
Right.
result, right? Because I use that for my research, but I realized, no, I'm not really get it. These are all bunch of keywords. I didn't feel it. Right. So somehow that influenced the way we teach design, or the way we experience design. And I feel that's interesting to me.
Right. No, that makes total sense. And I think it needs a certain understanding of, I feel like it's really, especially in ethnography, right? If you're not there, or you're not having the ability to like watch the videos, and you're just looking at the transcripts, you're already losing a big part of the insights, right? So it's really essential to kind of go through that journey. Yeah, Helen, I'd love to hear your perspective.
I think this is happening in universities. It's happening at the university level, but then also at the college, if you're in a college of design or a school of design, or even the departmental level. So at the university level, a lot of universities are getting into micro-credentialing now for their faculty around AI. So thinking about establishing a baseline of literacy for all their faculty across all disciplines around not just sort of mechanics, but also ethics. And I think that's very positive, and that's going to have a very it's going to have a cascading impact, right? From faculty to research to students, et cetera. So that's on the university level. On more the college level, I've heard of several, we're doing this here, and I've heard of several other colleges or schools that are also buying out faculty time, or donors that have given money, all around thinking about radical curriculum changes and really carving out that time right now to begin to deeply address how curriculum should be changing right now to address not this idea necessarily of like catching up with the technology, but just thinking about how curriculum might expand and create that kind of space so that it can adapt more quickly than it has in the past.
Right.
If that makes sense. That might sound more like, but so I see that happening at different institutions. I think that's great. I think that's something that should have happened a long time ago anyway. So the fact that now we have an excuse to put the resources behind those sort of deep changes is, I think, fantastic. And it's going to have a great impact on students moving forward. It's almost like you can be like, we need this because of AI. And then you get the resources that you've needed for a while to make the deep changes that are going to have huge impacts on our disciplines.
Are you thinking of coursework changes that are like much more deeper, like through AI processes? Is that on the table? I mean, like a core curriculum or yeah, I'd love to hear from that.
I think certainly there might be coursework changes, as in like special topics or topics but I'm talking more in this about learning objectives. So the learning objectives themselves, like really rethinking what are our objectives, right?
Right.
And how are we going to achieve those objectives? And so how do our outcomes change? And how does our process for achieving those outcomes change because of the shifts in technology? And certainly out of that, some courses like you're talking about will naturally emerge, and I think they're already emerging, but I'm talking about more across the board change here that has needed to happen. I think, and so let's do it. Let's get in there and make those changes.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is that I feel like, AI right now, even like Midjourney or Creo or all these platforms, are not really made for designers, right? They're made more for as a general purpose tool, and designers are kind of adapting them for their processes, right? And it would be interesting to see if there is really going to be, a seismic shift like Figma. Is Figma going to have like a much more AI driven workflow, or even 3D CAD? Are we the future of 3D CAD, will it be all AI and you just prompt based inputs? Like, I think we're still at the forefront of that shifting and building much more purpose-driven tools for designers. And I'd love to hear, like, if there is even I know that academia is always driving innovation, right? In the private sector, or many times it does. Is there any partnerships you guys are working on? Is there anything that comes out of like interacting with industry that you guys feel you're influencing? I'd love to hear from maybe even start with Helen or Sheng or Diane. Is there anything happening?
So I do a lot of industry government collaborations, and actually I've done a lot of work with the intelligence community in the last few years, thinking about critical decision making and collaborating with AI to make critical decisions in, say, a hostage situation or some moment in which it is imperative that the human user can trust the predictions or that they're being delivered to them, and they're able to verify and interrogate systems, and designing systems that can help instill this issue of not just trust, but create trustworthy systems.
Right.
So a lot of my work has been around that. And interestingly enough, I can talk more about those government projects than I can the industry projects, which I think is really funny, because you think of like intelligence as like locked down, but but actually it's more about sharing ideas right now. So so a couple of projects that I'm working on that I think kind of tap into what some of the stuff we've been talking about. One is around visualizing levels of uncertainty in the output of large language models. So we experience those outputs as this natural language in a very neutral way. So how can we design kind of intuitive visual cues for different levels and types of uncertainty that naturally emerge in that output, so that people know what they can trust, what they can't, what they should interrogate, what they should dismiss, because that existence of uncertainty isn't an error, it's just innate, to these statistical systems. So I think design can play a huge role in that. Another project I'm working on that I just finished was thinking about how we might help humans to remember information more, but not replace memory, but instead augment memory. So we worked on a project in which intelligence analysts can, when they come across little bits of information that they find interesting, but they're not sure why, they can use Gen AI to really quickly create these little simple, unique visuals to capture that information, put it to the side, and then they can, every time they look at that visual later, it'll create a memory trace back to the original information and the information around that information. So just thinking about how you might use AI, not to replace memory, but to instead build upon our natural process of remembering. So anyway, yeah, just a couple of things.
I think that's a really useful tool also for potential research, right? Because you could, go through a data set and then just park these ideas, because, it's really important, especially in synthesis, to start with a smaller data set and then augment it instead of looking at a larger data set and then getting lost in it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shengyang, I know that MIT is doing lots of collaborations. I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, I mean, the funny thing, we just do like we want to collaborate with the company Teague. So think about the future space traveling for aging population and use the AI as a design tools. That's a one project. Another project is more relevant recently. Is like we try to think about what's the cool AI framework we can use as designers. So think about, we have like a advisor AI like a Siri, right? Like Alexa from Amazon, and we have like butler AI like robotic, so they can bring your packaging and bring the things for you. Or we have like a valet AI help you parking, and we have system AI. So try to think about what are the cool framework we can help us organize our thought, give us a strategy for future business, also like a design process. And that's the things we're working on right now. And I feel it's super relevant to this topic because we have more and more engagement and exposure on this topic, and also help us reflect more what's the role as designer in this project, right? Like, oh, right. If everyone knows prompt generate AI tools, what's the thing we're not be replaced, right? And that's pretty fascinating to me to witness and be part of this process.
Mm-hmm. Diane, I'd like to hear from you.
I don't know that I have anything to add specifically. I mean, I think what this conversation has just been prompting for me rather is just how design is really this like multidisciplinary practice anyway, and how maybe the AI can allow us to make more, I don't know, make these connections more quickly or more deeply in some of the things we're doing. I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's also a lot of places where it needs to be, I don't know, it just needs to be explored and practiced more. And I feel that, like, certainly from my point of view, and perhaps from my students as well, that's really what we're doing. We're just kind of seeing what is out there, what are companies doing with it, what can we find as far as examples to try out and practice on our own, what does that lead us to think, and how can we incorporate this into our process. So right. It's really very exploratory.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I think, designers are the ultimate hackers, right? We're very comfortable taking a tool, using it for something it was never intended for, and getting really good results out of it. And in a sense, AI is just another tool in that toolkit, right? And I think that's also why maybe corporate leaders sometimes don't understand designers, because we're very comfortable with the white space. We're very comfortable with kind of, working in challenging conditions, and really pushing the envelope, and to make some people maybe not as comfortable. Yeah, I think we're at the end of the seminar, of the webinar. I'd love everybody to join us today. And let's keep the conversations in touch. We're gonna have the insights for LinkedIn. You can reach out to us, please. And then at the same time, let's keep in touch on future dialogues. Thank you so much.